All right. Well, welcome to the show.
Thank you for inviting me back.
Yeah, glad for having you back.
Awesome.
Yeah, we've had a couple people, but only the very best ever come back twice.
I feel honored.
If you come back 3 times, man, that is money.
Okay.
I think your arms grew since last time.
I've been trying, like continuing to train, right? What do you say? Just continuing to progress that's where the money is. So.
Good.
Yeah.
And that's because you're competing this year.
Yes. Yeah. So we're just finishing off our off season. We'll be starting prep in probably 1 to 2 months. Yeah. Which, do the math, is going to be about 20 to 26 weeks.
Okay.
Yeah.
Why so long?
I like to take a long time. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, nice and gradual. Yeah. We'll get right into it. But I like to take a nice long time.
Yeah.
Just to retain as much muscle as I can. Yeah.
Okay. Cool. Yeah, and I guess maybe by way of slight introduction, although I would have already said it, you know, you have a couple gyms, you're doing some coaching. This year you're going to be competing. You also get involved in powerlifting, which is pretty cool.
Yep.
That'd be a neat thing to touch on. And what else? Well, you got a couple cute little kids that are now the youngest employees, and
they pretty much run our shows now. It's awesome, right? And just can hand off the baton.
That's awesome. Yeah, and the nice thing about them is they could probably just walk under the stage at the shows and fix stuff.
Totally.
Run wires.
Any wiring that needs fixing, just kind of.
And they could, maybe you could even dress them in black or something and have them. They could be on the stage and no one would even notice. And
No, totally.
That's awesome. Well, excited to have you. Glad you could be here. It's been, how long is it? About a year?
Yeah, I think it was last year. I think you were just getting into prep or just starting or something like that. So about a year.
That's cool. And I think what we wanted to do in this this episode is to cover a bunch of stuff having to do with shows, about getting ready for shows, just making sure that we keep people going in the right direction. And then, so we're right into show season right now, which is pretty exciting. So
I think we're about 10 weeks out from our first show. And, typically May, June gets pretty busy in the natural bodybuilding scene locally and just worldwide and such like that. So May, June gets pretty busy. And then usually summer's a little quieter into the sort of the full season, September, October, November. Yeah.
And then the WNBF is it's expanded a bit worldwide too. So there's
we're in over 56 countries now. Yeah. I think the Maldives was the latest one to come on board, which sounds like a pretty fantastic destination in my mind.
Where is it? I have no idea where it is.
Somewhere very warm and close to the equator.
Is it closer to which continent?
I think that it's like in between India and Asia, like Asia, India.
Okay.
Sort of. Yeah. So.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
And did you go there last year?
We went to Mauritius last year, so that was another one that was in the Indian Ocean. That was just just a phenomenal environment and vibe. It was really cool.
So if someone goes from a show in Calgary, let's say, to a show there, what's the eye opener? Like, what are people going to see that's crazy?
If people are going kind of internationally and stuff
they leave here, they're used to what they're used to, and then they go there, and it's like, whoa, what's going on?
I think culturally, it's just a different scene in different areas, right? Asia's so up and coming in the fitness world. They have huge shows, but also physique-wise, they have very similar physiques, right? They have 200 men's physique that are all within 2 inches of each other. So.
Oh, really? Yeah.
So I think it's just eye-opening on the culture side of things, and every promoters they have access to different the way they produce shows, and there's some really cool things going on out there. It would be really cool to experience. So
that's cool. I've seen some videos. They're probably old, but you see some of these videos from some of the shows and the kind of the deep Africa and stuff, and you see them all kind of like they're all buddies and they're all like playing basketball before the show or whatever, playing soccer, and it's pretty cool to see it. So
totally,
it's a fun show. So, what's the first show for WNBF this year?
So we always start with our Vancouver show, May 11th.
Okay,
it's a great show. We get a ton of bodybuilders, men's physique, bikini athletes. So that's a good show to start off with. Then we go into Edmonton 2 weeks later, May 25th.
Okay,
week after is Kelowna on June 1st, and then finished our spring season with Winnipeg on June 18th.
Okay.
21st or something like that, yeah.
And then there's a gap to the Calgary show.
Yeah, and then we take the summer off typically. And there are shows that happen all over the world in that,
for sure.
within the WNBF. But then our first year in Regina is in September. We have an Ontario show, which is at the beginning of September. And then our Pro-Am is our Calgary show. And this is our biggest show of the year, or we have a 2-day event. Amateurs on the first day, and then pros on the second day,
Yeah.
on the Sunday there. So all our pro winners on the day before typically will jump into the show. And we had athletes from 9 countries come last year, from Israel to Hong Kong to South America, Italy, and Mexico as well. So we had a really good showing and really good caliber of competition, which they were calling it the pre-Worlds, which is a really cool sort of title for us, right? And
that's great.
We did great actually at Worlds this year. We had 3 athletes come back with World Championships. 2 overalls and one class win.
That's amazing. And this year Worlds is in Boston.
This year's in Boston, and we're hoping to bring another solid team down with us this year.
Is it a couple weeks later?
It's usually about 3 to 4 weeks.
3 to 4 weeks. So what does someone do if, I just wonder in these conversations, as you may know, what does someone do if they're in the Vancouver show or Edmonton or whatever, and they're targeting the pro show, but now they've peaked, they're where they are, and now they're, the smallest they're going to be. Now you'd have May, June, July, August, September, October,
6, 7,
5, 6, 7. Like, what do you do? Like, what's the best thing for an athlete at that point?
Generally, you want to reverse them out, but you need to be a little bit more strategic about it. You want to slowly build up their calories after the show. So kind of, you don't want to go through the usual sort of, binge cycle where they're going to gain a whole bunch of weight. Ideally, you probably want to stick within about 10 pounds of stage weight, but done gradually over time. So you can feed them up out of the show. Hopefully some recovery happens hormonally, physically, mentally, everything out, a little bit less food focus, etc. And maybe hold them for a little bit there. And then, ideally you're within about 10 pounds. So you're within touching distance, and then 8 to 12 weeks out from the competition, you can kind of put them back into sort of a prep phase, right?
So it's kind of interesting because we always talk about the your bulking season or whatever, then your cutting season, but that in between season we just abandoned that, right? Because like realistically, you're not going all the way back up in weight, so that's different. And then realistically, that means that you don't have to have as long a cutting period as well.
Yeah.
So then you can work harder, maybe during that time frame. You maybe come up, like you said, 10 pounds or whatever, a small percent, and then you're back into cutting at that point.
Yeah, if you can stay closer to your competition weight, it does make the prep easier, right? So, but typically if we're, 6 months out, 12 months out from a competition, we're going to be 20 to 40 pounds over probably for most people. But you have to take it nice and slow and strategic along that way, and, extend your prep to have a good prep. But this is kind of an in-between, right? Where you need to recover because you need to ideally trying to put on some muscle over that time. And then when you get into the prep, it doesn't need to be as long, thankfully, right? So,
I found this was an interesting kind of mental thing for me, or maybe it was physical as well, is that like I did a fair amount of competition last year, like over that 12-month period. And I think what was in my head, I saw myself get really lean, and then I saw myself get fat, and then I was lean and fat, and I kind of got lost in it a little bit. And at some point it didn't make sense, and then, I get to a really light weight and I think, okay, is this where I would have been 2 years ago, or do I feel like I've progressed? And like it kind of messes a little bit because you kind of reset these bars all the time psychologically. You see yourself at 170 pounds, and then you're 200 pounds, and then you're, and it's like you're always resetting the bar. It's weird. Like it really messes with me.
You've got that sort of that base or expectation of what a weight looks like. And you almost need to come away from that. It's good to compare yourself over time, but, be as objective as you can. You need to improve. And what does that look like, right? And there's many ways to improve, right? Is it a little bit leaner? Is it certain muscle group that's been brought up over the time? Is your presentation better? There's a whole many factors that come into it.
I'm going to be taller this season.
There we go. Just add some inches onto your
Why not?
Into your
Everyone's targeting these other things. Like I might as well pick something I can. Whatever. That's not going to happen. So it's, and I guess maybe that leads us into, kind of this whole structure of like when you look at when you're an athlete, I guess, someone is going to say, well, I don't know where to go, I don't know what to do, where to start, and obviously you have to work out, but it's the whole weight gain, and then a lot of people get lost at this 16 weeks. There's this kind of magical 16 weeks out there.
It used to be 12 weeks, so at least people are going longer now, which I'm all for. So
and then there's a bit of the extreme. It's like, well, maybe I should be doing 26 weeks. Like, why am I doing? And then, so why do you think this is an interesting? Because I've seen. Did you? Oh my God! Hold on. I'm gonna skip over to something totally different. Did you see the interview of that Lane Norton did with Steve Bartlett?
I did not.
He's crying in the video. Lane Norton is crying.
Oh, that's a first.
Yeah. He's usually yelling at us.
Yeah.
So.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, I missed that. Maybe it'll pop up on my Instagram now or something.
It will. Yeah. Yeah. It will. So, and I guess I think of him because he packs a lot of information into what we should and shouldn't do, and do we lose muscle or not lose muscle, and I don't know. So like maybe that's the kickoff. Like I can, if I'm a rank amateur, I can definitely just work out, and then someone arbitrarily has to say to me, on this date, which represents 26 weeks or 16 weeks or 12 weeks or 8 or 12, 10, whatever. At that point, you have to start dropping weight. So, but how do you ever decide?
Yeah, so I mean, first of all, you have to do an assessment, right? So either with a coach, which is ideally most people kind of working with people that can have an objective view of what's gonna happen over a time period. But if someone's 40 pounds over stage weight as a bodybuilder, natural bodybuilder, versus someone who's maybe 15, 20 pounds over stage weight, two different time frames, two different lengths of prep, and two different preps, right? So so you have to do an assessment, and typically a good rule of thumb is about a percentage loss per week on the aggressive side, but 0.5% towards the end. So, if someone's got 40 pounds to lose over, and they're 200 pounds, give or take, that's going to at least be a 6-month prep, right? And that's assuming nothing comes up over the 6 months, right? So I always like to factor in a little bit longer, just so, maybe there's a vacation in here with the family, or something pops up, work, have to travel with work, et cetera, et cetera. So I always like to give it a little bit of a buffer zone as well. So maybe that's actually a 30-week prep. Right. So you have to do an assessment first, right? Let's see how much body fat someone has to lose, right? There's calculators out there. You can do visual assessments with photos and stuff like that, and just experience over time will tell us roughly how much someone has to lose. And then, you just kind of, you start manipulating the variables, right? So,
I don't know if you'd agree, but in talking to you, mostly it's first timers and sometimes kind of that next level crowd, you start talking to them about, okay, well, how much do you need to weigh on stage? And especially first timers, like someone my height, they would say, well, I should be like 212 on stage. There's like, I've seen Bumstead, I've seen Arnold. I'm smaller, but I should be 212.
Right.
And then,
so you're just going to continue to eat into the show.
But then when you get to a show, it's such a wake up call. And, I look at even my first show back, it was in 18. And I look at it and it's like, I was still fat then. Like I wasn't even like super lean. And I remember my weight and think, wow, I can't, like from the beginning of your prep, I couldn't fathom the weight that I had to get to because my brain could not be there. Like it wasn't going to do it. And that's part of why at a bare minimum, you need honest friends to say, look, Leo, you're fat. You're going to have to lose 20 pounds. Yeah. And actually, there was an interesting conversation I had, or a coach, and they would do it too. But I had this one guy I was working with, and he had to lose so much weight. But in his brain, you could tell, like, just in talking to him, I would say, you still probably have to lose 20 pounds now. But in his head, that wasn't real. And I think there's this tendency to think, I'm really only about 5 pounds away. No, it's more like 25.
Take a step back here. Brian Whitaker, who's one of the most conditioned natural athletes of time, he'd say, once you think you're ready, lose another 10 pounds. So that's generally a good rule of thumb. So, having honest friends around, having a good coach who can kind of keep you objective is definitely key. And don't focus on that scale weight, right? You can't say, hey, this athlete over here who's been competing for 30 years is this weight, but we're about the same height. Yeah. You can't ever compare yourself to anyone, so just kind of throw out the scale with the sense of having something to kind of hit and just use it as a guide more than anything, because then next time you've got something to compare yourself to because you've already done it before. Yeah,
and I've struggled too with, excuse me, I've struggled too with watching the scale even, because we hear, and we've even said it here, you're supposed to be somewhere between 1 and 2 pounds per week. for a natural athlete. But, you know, 1 week I'm up, next week I lose 4 pounds. It's like, oh, and then you get to the week where you stay flat, and then you get into panic mode and you don't eat for a day, and then everything goes sideways, and then you weirdly gain weight. Like it's really tough. So one thing for me that I've always done, and this isn't perfect because it doesn't really account for the water variable, but I've got this one spot, it wouldn't show on the camera, but it's right beside my belly button.
Yep.
And I will put calipers on it every single day just to see where it's at. Yep. And it's weird. It does like disappears. So.
Yeah, usually we see like typically if people are holding weight, if we actually looked at photos from a week prior, they are leaner, but they're holding some water for some reason, sleep, stress, or something like that. But if you physically felt, you know, a certain area continuously, it would actually be reducing slowly. Right. So maybe it's not always just, again, it's not just the scale, you know, but it's measurements. It's maybe a caliper or a pinch or and photos as well is one of the best measures we can use.
And I thought too, for like, even though I was kind of pinching my belly fat, I was watching my legs a lot too. And I saw every single couple pounds my legs would change. But my upper body, totally the same. So if I was taking pictures in pants, I would have looked like exactly the same as 5 weeks earlier. So totally. It's kind of weird, actually. So I lose weight from top down.
I mean, that's I think more of a guy thing as well. It's just we generally put on more weight up top and we lose it faster, right? So legs are, for most people, come in last. I would be interested. We should probably get one of the evidence boys to do a research on if, I don't know if I can make this make sense, but like when we go to lose weight, do I lose weight as a percentage the same off my upper chest as I lose from my butt? So if I lose 5% of my body fat or 5% of the fat that exists here, do I also lose 5% from the fatter areas? I see it more here because 5% of 10 pounds is much greater than 5% of a few ounces. That would be interesting to see if that's actually what's happening, or if we lose it all off of the upper body first and then it starts to go off the lower. That would be interesting to see if it's a timing issue. It would be a fascinating sort of research study. It'd be a whole lot of calipers and a whole lot of pinching for 26 weeks or so.
DEXA
right?
scans. So, you could do it with DEXA scan.
Yeah.
That would be interesting, actually. I'd be kind of curious.
Put it out
to
someone out there.
Yeah.
Sure, they'll pick it up as a master's study.
Yeah. We'll send it out to Eric. He'll do it. He'll do anything. So you're kind of more on the 16-week scale. As you prefer, I guess it depends on where a person's at, but you'd prefer 16 or
I would
20?
Say most people, I'd say, from a coaching standpoint, I'm like, 26 weeks out is at least at a minimum of an assessment, right? Just so that we're not going to be behind the 8 ball later on, right? So, but typically, somewhere between 16 and 26 weeks. If they are coming to me a little earlier, then at least we can kind of get some consistency going into prep. I also like to do what's called a pre-prep for some people, and this is maybe even before that time. So even for myself, I did a little bit of a pre-prep already. So I dropped about 10 pounds, and then I start building up food again over 2 to 3 to 4 months, but ideally staying a lot leaner this time. So now you're within a sort of 10 to 20 pounds within a stage weight already. So some people, I might do this sort of like pre-prep mini cut sort of idea, where you sort of clean things up or just go through a little bit of a cutting phase, and then you actually sort of reverse out of it, gain back that glycogen, gain back some of that strength and performance, and then you're primed kind of the fat loss phase for the majority of the prep. Right. So then we get right into a prep. So somewhere between 16 and 26 weeks out, depending on how much they have to lose. And then you kind of go through your just major fat losing phase, right? Typically 1 to 2 pounds a week, or 0.5% to 1% per week, a little bit more aggressive at the beginning. But for the most part, you can kind of pretty much set their calories and, for the most part, set it and forget it for a while until you have to start manipulating things, right? As you sort of get closer to your stage weight and, the body sort of starts responding or stops responding. Maybe someone moves a little less, you're going to have to put things into place, right? Do they have to sort of move a bit more? Do you have to start dropping sort of fats or carbs a little bit or calories? And then you're just tweaking things along the way, but you're always kind of reverting back to, okay, what timeline do we have left, right? Ideally, another thing I like to do as a coach is I like my clients to be ready a couple of weeks early so that we can actually start working food up into the competition itself, right? So, and that can only be done if someone's lean enough to begin with. Yep.
And I think in Arnold's in the encyclopedia, he talks about that, like being ready 2 weeks out before shows, like being stage ready 2 weeks out, actually, which is kind of crazy, but.
Yeah. But it gives you more freedom, right? And the stress is mitigated because if you're in that sort of position, you actually start working food up, someone can almost step on stage at any point and look good, right? Versus having to risk how much food am I loading up the day before or 2 days before, right? There's always a risk associated with, filling the physique up. Yeah.
I overdid it on the last one. God. I think one of the interesting things that I think maybe first timers don't quite get is that first show really is exposing what's underneath the body fat. Mm-hmm. And like so many people, they think, oh, I'm gonna at least be top 3 or something. But that goal of that first show is just to say, look, you got to this weight and you still have another 10 to go. So now in the next cycle, we're not going to get all the way out to this extreme weight so that when you have to cut, you're not going to have to spend a year cutting. Yeah.
You either have to extend it out or, hey, we know roughly what your starting weight was last time. Yeah. Let's maybe start about 10 pounds leaner, right? So
yeah, exactly.
And then you can go through a same sort of process ideally, but be ready on time at least, right? So
what's since you've been around athletes. So here's a pivotal question in the universe. Is there a hack to when you have an athlete and they're struggling to lose weight? Is there anything that you can tell them that they can keep their mind fixated on, or is it different for everyone, or is there any kind of motivation you can give them as like, you can do this type of commentary?
Yeah, I mean, people are always up and down. They're always second guessing themselves, right? Along the whole way, right? So you have to keep them focused on the goal, but the fact that they're doing this for themselves, right? And this is a challenge. This is not meant to be easy. Otherwise, everyone would do it, right? But you do have to stick to the plan and keep putting your 1 foot forward. If you want to be successful in anything in life, you've just got to keep moving forward, so to speak, right? So. I could send them an Arnold speech or something like that. Just go for a walk and listen to some YouTube with Arnold speaking. But in reality, people, they have to do it for themselves and they have to want to do it. And to do that, they have to just continue to keep pushing through. And it's going to be hard in places, but
I think most people aren't very prepared for that struggle when you're getting hungry, and it's very much like. I don't know if you'd agree, but I feel like it's so hormonally driven, that drive to eat, that it just shuts down, proper thinking. And it's like, it's fine. If I just eat 6 chocolate chip cookies, I'm going to be fine because I didn't do this earlier. And you just start justifying. But I think it's so hormonally driven that we don't have control over it sometimes.
We're not supposed to be in this state of a physique athlete, right? We're not supposed to walk around at 4, 5, 6% body fat, right? Like, so hormones are going to start changing, right? Like our focus itself, we're food driven, right? Like, we're meant to be hunter gatherers in a way. So, what's our first thought? It's food, right? Yeah. So how do you sort of mitigate that? Well, obviously it's having structure in your day, right? I think consistency and routine is key for things. But it's, properly spacing out meals. It's not under eating, because that's the other thing. If someone's in a 1,000-calorie deficit, well, that's not going to be a lot of food that's going to, fuel them. But, if they can, that's why also like a longer prep, right? If someone can extend it out even 4 to 6 weeks, you don't have to go as extreme on the dieting and within the low calories, and they seem to respond better. Maybe hormones don't quite drop quite as low. The food focus is better, performance is better, and they're just in the end they're a better athlete, so to speak, right?
Right. Yeah. I suspect, although I don't have any specific study attached to this, but I would suspect that longer, slower burn would cause less compensation from a metabolic standpoint. So you wouldn't see as a larger reduction in daily requirements, and so maybe that's better.
I would agree. So, that's generally my philosophy is, again, you're not sort of shooting yourself in the foot and having sort of this suppressed metabolism or hormones as much. Performance is better, and that just means hopefully someone's retaining more muscle as well.
Right. Yeah. That's always been an interesting one to me. I did a ton of research on, it was anecdotal research, let's be honest, just on how much muscle we actually lose, and I think there's this concept out there that, and it's the given that everyone accepts, that you will lose muscle mass. And then you start diving into some of the research, and you start to see studies that were done in Biosphere 2. They did a study on, do you lose muscle mass? And the weird thing is that people don't lose as much muscle mass near as what you would expect in a starvation situation. And they still, like, you'd see these guys were completely emaciated. They still had muscle, which was weird. But the other thing that started to come up a lot too was that, and there's a reason why I'm saying this too, is I think within the human muscle, just like any other mammal, we have body fat inside the muscle, and that goes away too. And so I think one of the fears, and I think it's debilitating to some athletes, is that they get into this in their head that they shouldn't lose weight because they're going to lose muscle mass. But then they get on stage and they're overweight because this other thing got in the way of them doing what they need to do. So I think at some levels, saying you're going to lose a ton of muscle mass, it's true, not always the best thinking pattern.
Yeah, I think it's the physical structure. Maybe we actually don't lose as much as people sort of portray. But you're right, like glycogen, water, sodium, intra-triglycerides and fat and stuff like that, right? That's all stuff you're going to lose. And one of the perks about kind of loading slowly into a competition is you're starting to bring back some of that glycogen and that the sodium and the things that have been lost, so the flatness that we speak about, and you're filling up into the show. So you're right, if you probably took someone from the right before a competition versus 2 weeks before a competition and then at the start, I wonder what the actual physical changes would have been from the very
if you did a biopsy the muscle and just to see what's actually in there. Like if you could count the cell, like, and to see actually how many cells or what's in there that's disappeared. So it would be really interesting. So maybe there's another study. This is the whole purpose of this is to kick out studies. So and I forgot, I was going to mention too that there was, I think it was Eric Trexler. He did a podcast on modalities of diet. So not the diet itself, because it would be kind of starting with this architecture that, you got to drop calories to lose weight. Essentially, that's the long and short of it. You're in and out. It's just a calculation. But then the bigger challenge that most people have is not just dropping the calories, but it's staying into it, like complying to the diet. So diet compliance is a big issue. And he actually presented 7 or 8 modalities that you could use to manage it. The best one, I don't know if you heard, did you hear this podcast? Oh, it's super good. I'll send it to you. But the first modality he comes up with is this secular Buddhist concept of, and I'll have to give the short version because he does a fabulous job of laying it out. But essentially, you have to picture yourself, and this is the concept, the Buddhist concept. You picture yourself on the side of a riverbank, and on the river that's going in front of you are leaves. Those leaves represent strong emotions, or in this case, appetite. Right. And so you now have to choose to interact with those leaves. They're going to pass you, and you don't have to interact with them at all. So the hunger, by extension, is going to simply pass. And so he lays it out really well in his thing. But that's a great way of...
They almost come in waves, probably, right? Yeah, it's just choosing to focus on it or not. And
you can choose to interact with your pain or your hunger or whatever it's going to be.
So that's what I'm going to use for my clients next time that they ask is, what's something that I can do to mitigate hunger? Because usually I'm like, go for a walk or drink a hot tea is usually a good one as well. You want to take your mind off food in general, but maybe it's just choosing not to interact with it, right? So
one thing you mentioned tea, and one of the funny things he said is he said, from his standpoint, like for him, green tea suppressed appetite for him. And he said part of it was like when you think about coffee, what goes good with coffee? Well, you're going to have donuts and pancakes.
Chocolate, cookies,
Any food item goes well with it. What goes well with green tea? Absolutely nothing. So he would say if he got hungry, take green tea. Just take green tea and we're good. So,
there we go.
That was kind of an interesting one. So So anyway, let's look at what prep starts to look like. Let's say it's, I don't know, are we going to go with 20 weeks or 16? Just for the sake of
we'll say 16 weeks. Like if someone's
4 months
into prep or they're just starting, right?
So 4-ish months. So here's a question for you and one thing that I do, and I don't know if this is a good idea or not, but when I lay out my calendar, which I do very physically on a large calendar, I look at 16 weeks as being 17 weeks because I always have the last week before a show. Right. I don't count it because I'm not dropping weight during that time frame. And if I want that extra week, I go back, and then so now I'm maybe a full 18 weeks before the stage date. But I don't know, that works for me. So because then I can say, okay, I have this period of time to lose weight. I have a little 1 week of wiggle, and then I'm into reloading. You know, so where do we go? So we're into 16 weeks of prep, however we look at it. Do you just on day one you just dump your calories? Is that the game plan?
Yeah, I mean, generally you wanna reduce some sort of food, right? So, if you're within about 10%, let's say someone's 10% from stage weight at that point, that's kind of enough to lose over that sort of time frame. Yeah, is you know how many pounds that's going to be because it's a straight calculation, and generally you can kind of work out a calorie equation there, right? 3,500 calories is going to be about a pound of fat, so then you have to work out your deficit on a daily deficit. Now, is someone going to take refeeds? Is someone going to not take refeeds? There's some things that you're going to have to manipulate there. But then, you sort of drop your food by a certain amount of calories to begin with, right? Generally, I like to start there, right? I like to give them 1 week, 2 weeks, just to see how they sort of respond. Are they losing appropriately? Did they not lose enough? Did they lose potentially too much, right? Did you overshoot it? And then you can sort of start to layer some other things in. Okay, is it going to be movement? Is it going to be some cardio? Is it, and then you can they're your variables that you're going to basically manipulate over that time, but you want to kind of keep things ticking along at that consistent rate. That
first couple weeks can be kind of a crazy time too, because suddenly you could drop 4 pounds in 2 weeks so easily. Because all the glycogen just disappears. You feel depleted and terrible. And
totally. It's the worst feeling.
Or it's the best feeling because like, halfway to my goal. And it's like,
the goal wasn't big enough.
That's right. Right. But and then you get more into it. And I found too, I've seen people where they, in the first couple of weeks, they'll lose like 4 or 5 pounds because they're just peeling out glycogen and water. Yep. And then in week 3, they gain 2 pounds. It's like, what happened? And it's like, well, no, now you're on track. Yeah. Like we're going where we're supposed to go.
Yeah. Once it's evened out. Yep.
Yeah. That's interesting.
Yeah. So then, most of that, you're just playing with the variables until you're ready. You will have to dig a little bit more towards the end, right? Yeah. This is when the, hormones are maybe a little bit suppressed, movement sort of slows down and stuff like that. So maybe you will have to take an athlete for the last 4 to 8 weeks where they're actually going to sort of grind a little bit more, where they have to, push cardio to a point where they maybe don't want to go, move more and maybe drop calories a little less than they probably thought initially, right? Yeah. So, things are good until they're not good, right?
Yeah.
And then
I think that's a tough one as well. And when I talk to people about that whole cutting process and dropping calories, and there's this weird social consensus that dropping calories at any time is dangerous and unsafe and unhealthy and whatever. But I guess the reality is this is a sport where that's what you do. So you're not going to get around that. And, it's probably super unpopular to even say it out loud, but I think a lot of pro athletes and like people that excel, they drop their calories way lower than most people think. And they probably go on Instagram and they say, I've dropped my calories all the way down to 2,500 now. And it's actually 1,000. But they're just, I don't know why they do it. I don't know why there's this.
Yeah. Well, I heard one of the athlete that won the lightweight pro class in Worlds this year.
Okay.
He's a lightweight athlete, so 150 pounds or so.
Yeah.
He was saying that he had to get down to 1,400 to 1,700 calories as a male athlete. Like, that's digging.
Well, and he's 150.
Yes, totally, right? That's,
Do you know, there's a video with C-Bum, and he's like a few weeks out from the Olympia. He's at 1,600 calories.
Yeah,
and he weighs 220,
right? And
or whatever he was.
5,000-6,000 in the off season easily. Yeah, right. That's like a big change.
He goes through his full day of eating, and it's like a small amount of rice and a little bit of chicken and no sauce on it and stuff. And he's totally fine. He goes to the gym and works out, and I
think people mentally, they don't like the mental aspect of the actual prep maybe itself, and having to mentally have to go there. Not even physically. Like physically, if they were just, this is your food, eat it for the day, it would probably be fine. But they're mentally, they know the numbers, they feel like they shouldn't be there. Yeah. And that's what's the hard part versus actually like being objective and just being like, hey, this is what I have to do to get in the condition that I need to step on stage.
Yeah, I don't know why it's weird that you ever hear people say things that, we say weird things and then we say things. This is debilitating is when I say, look, you should never go lower than your BMR. Mm-hmm. Well, what if I need to?
Right.
Like, so what if I don't eat today? Yeah. How bad's that? Probably not that bad at all. I've gone days without eating hardly anything. So yeah, I don't know. It's weird. I think there's a lot of stuff that gets out there into the social media sphere that I don't know why it's almost like it's intentionally designed to stymie me, like to slow me down from being successful for some reason. I don't get it. I don't know
if it's kind of a clickbait thing from the get-go,
right?
That's true. And that's what's kind of getting out there. And then, but you've always got to look at if I'm doing this, is it actually pertaining to what they're actually saying? Maybe it is, maybe it's not. I'm not sure.
Yeah, right? And they're not. They're using their personal experience and they're applying it, and it's probably not even true. 100%. Who was it that was like it was The Rock. Pure entertainment. But he would say, these are my off days, these are my cheat days, and it'd be like 10,000 calories. Oh, yeah. It's like, there is no conceivable way that's your cheat day. No. You couldn't even put all that in your mouth over the course
that's over like 3 days maybe.
Right? Maybe. That's the worst. So, okay, so I guess one of the other things we get into with prep is I think, I don't know, when you and I talk about it, it's going to be like, well, obviously. But, if you start out and your diet is, pick 2,000 calories just for argument's sake because it covers a range, by the time you get to a lower weight, it's not going to be 2,000 calories anymore. Yeah. So it has to come down. I don't know, that'd be interesting. You could almost do it mathematically, but it has to come down to compensate for the fact that you don't weigh as much, you don't have as much calorie burning material in your body anymore. So.
Seems to be two types of physiques where you've got like an adaptive metabolism and you've got like a non-adaptive metabolism. An adaptive one will be someone that is exactly that. You at 2,000 calories, but then every time you lose 5 pounds, you're going to have to drop the calories to accommodate for that drop of 5 pounds. Yeah. And you have these non-adaptive metabolisms that seem to just say, hey, 2,000 calories is a sweet spot, and I'm just going to continue losing until I don't lose anymore. And generally, that's like 80% of the way there. May have to fine tune a little bit towards the end, and then you're into the show, right? So, but I usually find the adaptive metabolism people, their off-season calories can get up a lot higher as well.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so they always have this really big range where they're like, hey, 4,000 or 5,000 calories in the off-season, but they have to get down to like 1,600, 1,500 calories in the season, right? Versus I'm a little bit more on the non-adaptive side where I'm like, hey, if I get much more than 3,000 calories in my off-season, I start gaining fat, right? Give or take a little bit. But I don't ever have to drop them much lower than 2,700, 2,500 at the very low end. So I've got this really narrow range.
You lose weight at 25?
Yeah, and that's that's like my digging phase, right? So, but I don't have as much fun in the off-season, right? I have like a pizza and I
don't even believe you right now.
I can show you my sheets from last time.
That's crazy because I'm way more than that. Yeah, I'm way lower than that to lose weight.
So yeah, I mean, I'm active in general. I'm always moving around in the day and stuff like that. So
that I'm not active during the day.
It's different. But so
I don't chase my kids around.
Yeah, that's true as well. It keeps me busy. So it does seem like there are these kind of like two different sort of metabolism sort of types within people. But yeah, generally if, you're at 2,000 calories, and some people lose, every 5 pounds, they're going to have to drop them by 100, 200 calories and just going to keep pushing it. They're going to have to keep moving the needle until they get to the position that they need to be in to step on stage.
Yeah, and if Eric Trexler was here, he would say that's a compensation response, and it's different for different people. Yeah. And, some people are just more, compensation, it has to do with how much we fidget, how much we move around, how much we think, how much we, just everything. And, everyone responds differently to a lower calorie environment. So some people, I've seen it, and you've probably seen it too. Some people, you put them on low calories, they shut down. Like they just stop talking. Yeah. They just don't interact well.
Yeah.
Other people, it's like, they're always Energizer Bunny and they just vibrate all the time.
And the former people are really tough people to prep because they have to really dig and stuff like that. So
I suspect you'd have to put them on cardio. Those are the ones that probably
you're going to have to just move more. Yeah, do some more cardio typically because there's only so much calories that you can drop, right? I generally like to keep protein. That's at a certain level. You know, fats I don't like to drop too much below a certain level either. And carbohydrates, I go as much as people can tolerate. But on top of that, it's like, hell, you're just going to have to do some extra cardio. Yep.
Yeah. Do you like, I guess if you were prepping someone, do you like how much weight do you lose from cardio? How much weight do you lose from diet?
It's hard to say because, again, I think cardio is probably my biggest variable that I do. So it's like, it's not 50-50 for sure. Yeah. So, but I like the nutrition do the majority of the work. Make sure someone's not stopping moving, so just focus on some sort of step count. And then above and beyond that is typically you're just layering on some form of steady state cardio.
Yeah. It is interesting when you hear people say that they've gone through most of their prep and done virtually no cardio. Like all of the weight loss had to do with diet. Yeah. And I just don't, like even if you thought, 16 weeks, so you're looking at like close to, 100 days? Maybe somewhere in that
100
zone.
days. Yeah.
And then, if you did cardio every single day at 300, 400 calories a day, I don't know, you could do the math. You could say this is how much you lose from cardio, I guess. But
you could if you looking back, you can look. Yeah. But again, everyone's going to be different. It's not like there's this rule of thumb. It's going to be 50-50 or 60-40. Yeah. It's going to be one person is going to be, a good chunk of that is going to be cardio. And then you got the other side of it where it's like, hey, 0 of that was cardio. It was all sort of diet.
I don't know, I shouldn't call anything a hack, but we'll call it a hack for the time being. One thing that I've suggested to people is that when you're doing cardio, that you use one machine as a reference machine. And so, because what you see sometimes is like one day they're on the bike, next day on the treadmill, and then they're on the stair stepper, and then they're on the elliptical, and they're like, oh man, I lost 800 calories on that one and 400 calories there. It's probably all the same. Yeah. And so then I think it messes with you a little bit because you think you lost more, and then you compensate by eating more, which is dangerous, or that you you didn't lose any and then you compensate by not eating enough. I think it's dangerous. So I always say you grab one baseline machine. Yeah. That's your machine. Don't even go to the machine next to it. That's the same. Use that one because that one's your algorithm. Yeah. So it's kind of interesting. I don't know. Maybe it works.
I like having something that you can kind of use as your reference point, kind of like you said, right? Yeah. And then you can adjust it a little easier versus, again, now if you're adding in different variables, you don't know what quite is working, right? So, it's not a bad idea. Maybe it's having one or two that you can kind of...
You got to have variety, too.
Totally. Otherwise, if you're always doing the Stairmaster, that's a lot of climbing
When
stairs.
I was training I was in mountain biking for a long time, and I remember going to the gym that I am still going to, and I would be on the stationary bicycle for like 5 hours straight. It was it was like death.
Doing the Tour de France.
Pretty much. But like the cardio sports, which is so incredibly different than what we do. Yeah. It's all about base mileage. Yeah. So it's just about training your body to be able to manage ridiculous time. Yeah. So, crazy. Oh, well, that's why I don't do it anymore, because I really don't enjoy cardio at all. So, cool. So we're going to lose a bunch of weight. We're going to adjust things as we go. And I think maybe because we glanced over a little bit, I think in general, most coaches would set a person's protein to be fairly fixed. It might trip down a little bit, but for the most part, it's going to be fixed throughout most of the entire period. And then the fat, I think most of the time fats have a lower limit that you shouldn't go. It's probably mathematically somewhere around 35, 40 for the smallest people, and then up from there.
Yeah, I like to protein first. I like a gram per pound of body weight is a good point, or 1.1 to 1.4.
It's easy, right? Let's not argue about the math, but
Fats, I like to do a lower limit of about 20% of calories. Yeah. So again, if you're looking at that, someone's on 1,000 calories, it's going to be 20 grams. That's the lower end. Yeah. Right. 2,000 calories, it's going to be 40 grams. That's the lower end, right? Yeah. That sort of thing. And then to 30%, so add, double it or whatever. That's like kind of like somewhere in between there. And then carbohydrates, there doesn't seem to be a lower or an upper limit. It's just, hey, it's just, we're filling in the gaps now, right? So, but now if someone's got like 20% of fat, like whatever, they're on 30
as
grams
low
of
as
fat,
it can be,
but they're like on 300 grams of carbs. I'm like, there's a little bit of a disconnect there.
Sure.
You want to kind of probably balance out calories a little bit more. And there's, fats have some purpose. Digestion is a huge one in prep. As we know, as we get leaner, things become a little bit more irregular or slower, or digestion issues and stuff like that. And that's often, I think, is because fats are dropped too low. And so you look at it as a bit of a tool, use it as a sort of a bit of a digging phase maybe, but ideally you need them there for certain health reasons as well.
And fats shuttle hormones.
Totally.
That's like a big part of their role. And if you have no fat intake, you run into some very serious issues.
So that's on my low end. I don't like my athletes to go down to 20%, but 25, 30% is a good rule of thumb there, and then fill in the difference with carbohydrates.
So cool. You can just create a little spreadsheet or use whatever to do that.
That's a good starting rule of thumb, and then you just, like you said, manipulate until depending on what you need happening, right?
Right. And then in some ways that kind of makes it easy. If you can stop thinking about the protein number, you don't have to think much about fats. And realistically, like to deal with a number like, let's say it's going to be 20 grams or 30 grams, it's almost impossible to hit that. You're going to be over and under whatever it's going to happen. So, and then it's just carbs after that. So, Do you like it's a highly debated question. Does it matter which carb it is? Like, do we care if it's table sugar or should it always be?
I think, common sense will say yes, it does matter a little bit, quite a bit. But, studies will show that generally it's a calorie equated thing. Now, but how you sort of respond to sugar is going to be totally different to how you're going to respond to sweet potato on the same thing, right? So you're going to digest that a lot slower. You're going to stay fuller for longer. Your insulin's going to be a bit more moderated, etc. Right? So I'd say be smart. 80-20 rule of just, hey, 80% is going to come from potato, rice, breads, pastas, whatever kind of things like that. And then maybe the 20% is a little bit of some Gatorade or some candy around workout if you have that sort of budget to allow for it. But if not, then I'd say, hey, just stick with whole nutrient-dense foods.
Right.
For sure.
I think, and I guess, for anyone who's competing or prepping, I don't think you've destroyed your entire prep because you had a chocolate bar. No. You just have to deal with that. And it's just part of the...
I like a flexible mindset around dieting, right? Like it's like, hey, I did have some chocolate with my coffee earlier or whatever. Okay, that was 200 calories. Okay, I'm just going to take my 200 calories from elsewhere. And I'm not going to beat myself up. I'm going to get right back on my plan. Versus someone who has that bit more that fixed mindset. I had that cookie, so now I'm going to eat that whole tray of cookies. Because I'm like, I'm off my diet. I'm like, okay, there's my 2,000 calories right there.
And then, of course, weirdly, people will flip the other way and they'll think, oh, I had a cookie, so now I won't eat tomorrow. It's like, whoa, that's insane too. Yeah, it's crazy.
Go right back on your base plan and just keep moving forward.
Yeah, crazy. So we're going to get up to, like, we're kind of walking up towards the show time, and there's lots of things to think about coming into a show. And so you're going to get to where you get to. Like, you're not going to, if you get 2 weeks out, you're not going to lose 20 pounds. That's never going to happen. So what would you say to someone who is still like 10 or 15 pounds overweight? They're at the show date.
If that's the only show that they're doing, then I'm like, we're going to go right into the show, right? Like, it's just, if they've got another show afterwards, that can be a good thing, because you can be like, I'm just going to continue to diet right through the show. I'm not going to worry about it peaking or anything like that. But, another option, if there's an area that has a ton of shows around or stuff like that, it's like, hey, I can just push back the show date, right? But, if that's their show, or maybe they've got a show afterwards, I'm just going to keep dieting them into the show, to be honest with you. Maybe it's their first time. I don't want to pull that. They've done a bunch of work. I'm not going to pull them out unless they really don't want to step on stage, right? So you just have to have that conversation with someone. It's like, this is where we're at. We still got 10 pounds to lose or 15 pounds to lose. It's not going to happen in that time. We'll do our best to continue to keep going, but just have an expectation. And this is exactly where we're at for right now. And if they're okay with that, and maybe they knew that to begin with or whatever, then it's fine.
Right? We have to treat it like a journey.
It's a journey.
Not a
totally.
So which makes sense.
Yeah.
So you get up. We're going to get up to because I think people care about what happens in the last couple weeks, but we get up to that point where we've essentially hit that weight thing that
we're ready. That's what we're going to say. We're lean and mean.
And then there's different kinds of way, and I think there's this mystical thing we talk about as loading, and it's our peak week, and everything's gonna change, and we're gonna be a completely different human in a week or something. Yeah. So, but I don't know. What's your take on peak week? What do you like the most, or is it different all around, or what's your favorite?
So what most people do they think peak week is going to be this magical week, right?
Yeah.
They've been the most consistent person for the last 16 plus weeks, and then what happens is they just totally flip everything on its head, right? And they're like, hey, instead of eating all these things that I've been eating, I'm now going to switch them out for all these magical foods and stuff like that, right? So I don't like that. I like consistency leading in. I'm like my clients to continue eating the same amount of foods, right? And stuff like that. But I like manipulating the variables leading into the show. So again, my athletes are ready in time. What I'm going to start doing is I'm going to either start fueling them up gradually each week or each day, just kind of slowly add a little bit more in so that you can see the physical fullness changing within the muscles. They should be starting to get a little tighter, a little fuller, right? The water is being held in the right places because glycogen is going into the muscles. I don't like to cut water because as soon as you cut water, the muscles are going to flatten out and they're going to soften up, right? So water's going to leave the muscle. So again, I like to keep water in there. Same with sodium, same with carbohydrates. And we just slowly, gradually fill the muscles up into the show. Check-ins become more frequent, right? How you look in the morning versus a lunchtime versus an afternoon. So, and I will factor that one in depending on when my clients are on stage. So, if someone's on at 9 o'clock in the morning, I want to make sure that they're at peak fullness for that time, as opposed to 3 p.m. in the afternoon where another class is coming on. So you just start manipulating the variables up until the show day. Keep water nice and high, but I like to keep it fairly consistent for the most part. And then keep fueling into the show. And some people, maybe it's a little bit more aggressive at the end, especially those that have that adaptive sort of metabolism. You start filling them up. Oh, now I'm going to move more and I'm going to fidget more. So they're the people that you actually have to be a little bit more aggressive with, potentially. But again, that's hopefully understanding a client from the very beginning to the end, right? So,
and I think some coaches, when they have an athlete over a long enough period, they have already gone through like a mini prep where they've said, okay, let's try this week. And I've done that with people where we say, okay, I want you to experience this because it's going to happen it's going to happen in 4 or 5 months from now. We need to know what's going to happen to your body and how you respond. So
I like to do sort of a bit of a planned pre-show day sort of thing with estimating your amount of calories and carbohydrates that they're consuming, as well as maybe increasing the foods that they've been eating by a certain amount, just to see how they respond. Do they bloat? Do they not bloat? That kind of thing. And that's good to do a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks prior. So you're already starting to experiment just a little bit, how people do respond to certain foods and variables. And then you're just gathering data. And then it's like, but I will say, I don't expect a perfect peak that very first time, because again, it's maybe my first time working with someone. But over time, that's where you get better and better at it. So
I've heard a lot of coaches too, and like coaches have been doing it forever. And I think it's a great kind of concept. Is it's way easier to wreck someone than to make this quantum change over that 1 week. So
I'd prefer someone walking around at 98% good, as opposed to changing so much that they become 70% bad or what have you, right? Like it's not gonna change too much. So
I think that's really smart. I think that there's some danger in overthinking. Realistically, kind of what you're saying is, does every athlete need to have a peak week? Because if you're not lean enough, what are you really doing in that peak week?
I'm not loading someone up into the competition. I'll give them a refeed the day before or the day of, just to give them some fuel and stuff like that. Like, I don't want them depleted on stage. But again, if they're still 10 to 15 pounds off, not much even loading is going to change that. So I'd prefer to keep dieting them down and to lose another pound or two. At least then you're going to see a few more lines that you wouldn't have initially. But peak weeks. It's much easier to ruin than to just come in nice and.
What are most like if we had to look at the top 5 things that people destroy in their peak week? What do they do?
Cut water.
They cut water.
Cut sodium, and sodium's a big one as well, because again, muscular contractions happen off sodium, right? And hold on. Then they load up with potassium. Another one. Now the chemicals within the muscle they're physically pulling all the water out of the cells. Yeah. And this is what happens with a lot of athletes that have heart issues. Is they're pulling sodium, they're increasing potassium, and the heart as a muscle, needs these electrolytes to contract, right? And that's what happens when people actually on stage or off stage, right? So that's a fatal thing, and that's not fun. So again, they cut water, they cut sodium, they increase potassium, and then training wise as well. I like to generally make sure my athletes are recovered going into peak week, right? So I'm using that a bit more like a deload week, so to speak. Cutting volume, maybe cutting intensity a little bit, but not that much, right? And then I'm just allowing my athletes to recover. And I like to train right the way up to Thursday or Friday for a Saturday show. So it just kind of keeps the glycogen turning over in the muscles, right? So I know an old way of doing it would be just to cut workouts a week before or 3 or 4 days before, right? And then the muscles get kind of stagnant, right? Because the glycogen is in there, but it's not being turned over, right? So
Yeah, I think it was interesting what you're saying about salt. I've seen studies that where they just reduce salt just to see what's the response. Your body doesn't give it up. And so like even when you stop taking in salt, weirdly your body's salt content almost stays exactly the same.
Yeah.
Like there's, I forget what the hormone is.
Aldosterone.
Yeah. That's the one that kind of just balances your salt.
It's going to pull it from areas and stuff like that, right? So it's pulling it from the muscles is what's happening because it needs to maintain a certain level in the bloodstream.
For function.
Totally, right? So, but then if you don't have sodium in the muscles, water's going to be depleted out, and then you're going to be flat and soft. And then you don't have water going in anyway because people are dehydrating, right? So rule 101, in my opinion, is let's not cut water. Let's not cut sodium.
In some ways, it's just like
just consistent.
Just do this. Don't screw around too much. It's interesting too. I wish we've all been to the gym, and then we've had the best pump of our lives. Imagine if we could record what caused that. Because now it seems like every time it happens in our memory now, because I remember it happening, but I don't remember if it was a pizza that I had or if it was, what did I do to cause that? That'd be great to figure that out. Yeah. But I don't know if anyone can ever figure it out. So. Yeah. But if you did look back to the day before and stuff like that, one thing they're still doing during that time is they're fully hydrated. They've often had something like a pizza or a burger or fries that have extra sodium in, and there's typically a few more carbohydrates. So, you know, it makes sense when you say it like that, right? But then what do they do leading through peak week or into the show day is they do the exact opposite, except that they still eat the pizza typically, but they just, cut the water. Yeah, there's this fear. I think a lot of new people, they're scared of going on stage, so they cut. And I think that fear also has an impact on our physiques. For sure, so we don't perform the same way. Yeah, so it's having good people around you that you can kind of have good advice from, right? Yeah. Yeah. So then we get up to, we're in the last week. That's eating. Yep. Then we've talked about working out a little bit. For me, I think I like doing a lot of, like when I say reps, I'm not talking about thousands, but I'm talking about, I enjoy reps. Like I'm much more comfortable doing like 15 reps than not. So I enjoy that during peak week for sure. So I kind of drop heavy weight and move into that. But not because I think I'm losing weight by doing it. Because a lot of people think, you got to increase your metabolism somehow. I think you have better mind-muscle connection at slightly lighter weights in general. So that's probably just a nice feeling for most people. And I'd say there's some sort of like flexibility or within someone's training is like, do what you feel good training, right? And that could be an exercise movement or pattern or just rep range itself, right? So, yeah, that's awesome. So then we get up to show, like let's say, I guess, simply on Friday night, all shows have some sort of athlete meeting. So we got to go to that. I always get a kick out of it. I was joking about it last few shows, and you go to these athlete meetings and everyone's like, you know what I mean? Like they're sucked in, and they're all eating rice. Everyone's like, or they have rice and peanut butter or whatever they're doing. But I just think it's hilarious that in a sport where we're so focused on losing weight, people eat constantly. It's so dichotomous, really.
And I think it's that mental thing is they think the prep's done at that point.
Yeah.
So it's almost like things are off limits now, and they start, you know, and then once it starts, it kind of continues. So you definitely, you got to look at it as the show. It's you're still not done until you're done the stage, right? So you still got a plan to follow. You know, you still got to eat the certain amount or types of foods and stuff like that. Yeah. But,
it does seem a little showy when people are.
Yeah, and I think they feed off each other, right? Like, it's like, hey, you're eating candy. I'm going to eat some candy, right? And it's like,
and everyone's
all plan is like...
Yeah. So we get to that. We do that. The next day, we have... we're at the show. We're, you know, there's usually tanning either Friday or sometimes they do it on the Saturday and Friday or just the Saturday. Anyways, whatever works out. And then I have like a checklist that I make sure that I have because it would be... psychologically devastating to not have your headphones, to not have a towel, to not like. There's so many things that I think are nice to have. So, is there anything that people have like full on? Has anyone forgot their posing suit?
Oh yes,
no way.
Yeah. So we always have a backup.
Really?
We have 3 pairs just in case.
Wow.
Right? So, we learned the hard way. Sometime I think one of our promoters had to bring a pair, and he ended up losing them, right? So because the athlete never gave them back, so we will always have extras now.
Yeah.
So people have forgotten stuff like that. Buttons as well. You get your numbers, your buttons at the thing. Someone will always forget them, so we have a blank set of buttons so that we can write on them. But having a towel for sure is good, just to lie down, put your feet up maybe a little bit. Headphones just to kind of relax and listen to some music. I do recommend getting there, 90 minutes to 2 hours before your predicted stage time. But here's the other thing as well. This shows, as much as we want them to run on time and prompt and stuff like that, invariably they're always going to be delayed a little bit. So, don't stress out if that happens, right? Have a plan in place, right? Expect it, exactly. So, and sort of with your food timing and stuff like that, you want to kind of, as long as there's good communication around it, right? You want to maybe adjust your food consumption around when you're going to be on stage as well, right? So, and that's all on the show promoters and the people that are helping and communicating to the athletes when the next groups are going to be on stage. Right?
I always think it's funny when you see backstage and there'll be someone who's got their coach with their backstage pass and they're posing, and then the coach is like, all right, you need 3.5 gummy bears. It's like, what are you talking about?
Yeah. So, I think people get so caught up in the minutiae as well, right? It's like 3 or 5 or whatever. You're still going to burn that off when you start pumping up, right?
Most of it's in your stomach, but probably
totally, right? Yeah. All the work, and that's a good point. All the work has been done leading up to that. Like that last little bit is usually it's just mental now at that point, right? It's just making sure they've probably got some simple sugars to be in their bloodstream, but at the most part, you're right. It's going to be digesting for a while, right?
Yeah.
So,
Do you know what's... I won't put you on the spot to answer the question, but... And I will say it like I'm asking you the question, but do you know how many grams of sugar are in the human body at any one time? Of blood sugar? Not in your muscles. So put a number in your head, then I'm just going to tell you. In your bloodstream, there's 4 grams of sugar.
Okay, I was going to say 30, but it's not very much, right?
Yeah, and so, you think a gummy bear, it's like... That's actually all of the sugar in your bloodstream, which is kind of crazy when you think about it. So,
but it's pulling it out when it needs it. I guess, right? Like, there's always a circulation going in, right? So, but ideally, we don't want it in the bloodstream. We want it to be pushed into the muscles, right?
So it is interesting because, like, if you ate, let's say you ate, I don't know, like it's probably we had a dietitian or a biologist, they'd be able to answer. But if you ate, say, 100 grams of pure table sugar, just for argument's sake. How long does that take actually to process through your stomach into the stomach lining, into your bloodstream, then, by insulin into your muscles or transferred into triglycerides and then into body fat. So it would be interesting because you could probably put a clock on it.
Yeah. But and table sugar will be different to, other things as well, right?
Yeah.
So, but I'm sure someone has some good answers for you.
Yeah. And then, but at the end of the day, I don't think it super matters on show day because
I think it's all the stuff leading up to.
Yeah.
It's all the stuff you've been doing throughout the peak week, right?
Yeah.
That's just that last little bit. So you're just making sure that someone still has carbohydrates.
Yeah.
You don't want to not feed them, right? Because they will flatten out quite quickly. But you need something there as substance, right?
I think I was listening to a podcast that Eric Helms did, and he was talking with Alberto. And they were talking about how everyone was like, it was like almost at the point of a stopwatch, and they had to like race cake at exactly this moment. And then the show was off schedule anyways. Yeah. And then it's like, did it really matter? But then all the pros who have been doing it forever, they're just like, whatever, whatever. Eat, don't eat. Whatever,
that's what comes with experience, right? It's just like, it's probably stress management and adaptability.
Right. Yeah. And you know what, I guess, I don't know what your thoughts are about the, and I'll pose it this way. It seems like a lot of, especially newer people, they get backstage, they grab some weights, and they're doing like a full workout. It's like their best workout they've ever had. It's like, it seems like a little bit too much.
Yeah, and the other thing as well is they do that like an hour before they get on stage, right? They're probably exhausted by there, right? So you don't have to do too much when you're pumping up, you know, two sets of 10 for all the isolation movements about 15 minutes before is good, right? So focusing on the shoulders, the arms, a little bit of back, and you know, some push-ups, and you're good. I don't generally recommend people pump up their legs, just because we can hold a little bit more water, and we can kind of the striations that should be there, and at least in bodybuilding in those classes, seem to fade a little bit. So I like to just kind of stretch them out and just try to relax them more than anything. Right?
I think over the long history, we've seen a lot of bodybuilders just elevate their legs at the show, and they don't touch their legs. They just do biceps, triceps, shoulders. Yeah,
that's probably a good rule of thumb as well.
Yeah.
So,
So then, that's the show.
Yeah.
So
obviously
pretty easy.
Yeah, I mean, make sure it's super easy. Make sure you're practicing the posing, obviously leading up to the show itself, so that you've got enough conditioning and stamina to be able to hold the poses for that long. Because without fail, the first time someone steps on stage, they don't understand how long they're going to actually hold the poses for, and how sore they are afterwards, after the show. So make sure you're practicing, you know, either working with a posing coach or having a group of people that you can pose with, you know, once a week or a few times a week for sure. But at least if you're practicing 3 to 4 times a week at 15 to 20 minutes, then that's a good starting point. Hitting all your mandatory poses, your walks and your flex poses, and then you're conditioned enough on stage, and those people who practice their posing less likely to sweat on stage and stuff like that. So there are some benefits to your practicing. Plus, it's a sport where you're showcasing your physique. You need to practice what you're showcasing.
Yeah, and it is interesting when you see, and I don't even think this necessarily applies to experience necessarily, but there's a spectrum of when people are up on stage, and maybe we would just pick on bodybuilding, men's bodybuilding, and you'd see one guy shaking, dripping sweat, and then the other guy at the other end, and he's just totally fine. He's just posed. And I think at some level, this might actually, like when the guy is doing that where he's falling apart, that might be bad coaching. And the coach needed to say, look, you need to relax. You need to not be at 100% contraction. And the other coach probably told the guy, look, you need to be about 80%, hold it, get into the pose, breathe. Don't breathe whenever you need to go. But the other guy, something happened.
Yeah, and then maybe it's a stage light as well, right? They're like, hey, they feel like the more they flex, the harder they flex, the better the muscle's going to look. But I think you're totally right. Like if you can say, if I can pose at 85% and I can hold that for 30 seconds without breaking a sweat, that's a much better position to be in than the guy who's going to, everything's 100%.
Yeah, because then you're shaking constantly. And then the downside to shaking, which is interesting, because I've talked to the spectator who watches people who shake, they don't see the shaking as much as you feel the shaking.
Right, yeah.
And then when you start to feel the shaking, you feel terrible. And then you just start to fall apart. Yeah. It's just like this slippery slope afterwards.
I think it is mental for sure, but the judges can notice it.
Yeah, they see it.
People just naturally, they don't get in their positions as quickly, right? They're out of their positions faster. When they relax, they really relax, right? They almost shut down, right? So I think the judges do notice it. So again, be on the person who can kind of, just practice 85%. It's a sweet spot.
Yeah, get in your pose. That's a lot of people can't get into pose. I remember different shows having the judges say, look, there's not so much transition. Get in your pose so we can see it.
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah. I think people make that mistake. That's quite a bit. But if you go to practice,
if it's really tight between two athletes, that's what judges will look at to differentiate the better bodybuilder, right? It's not just the better physique.
Right.
It's,
right.
Hey, this athlete, he's getting right into the pose. He's holding it for longer. That athlete looks very similar to him, but he's delaying his time. He's all the transitions, but not much time in the pose itself. That the judges will give the nod to the athlete who's posing.
Yeah, that's interesting actually. Here's an interesting thought, and you've been around a lot of athletes that didn't win, right? Because there's way more that didn't win, and the bigger the show, statistically, the less likely you are to win. Right? Makes sense. How do you? I'm going to say console, but how do you help someone who, they go? I've been there. I've gone into a show thinking I was going to win and come in third.
Yep.
And so,
I haven't won for a decade. So there we go.
Yeah. That's not what you're going to tell them.
No, exactly. It's like you're doing way better than I am. You did talk about journey earlier. So I think, first of all, you have to be like, okay, this was the best that we could have done, or this is the best package that you've brought to the stage for these reasons. The journey was the journey, and it was exactly what we wanted. But you can't control who comes on stage, right? And so you just got to focus on that. You can only control what you can control. Bring your best physique to the stage, and there will always be another opportunity, right?
Yeah.
And that's all you can do. But I think that's a good thing, right? That there are better athletes out there, because that's your motivation to continue to improve, right?
Yeah. It's a really tough thing, though, because I think everyone comes into it, and we probably look at ourselves in the mirror and say, I look good, like I'm going to destroy this, I'm going to be, and you start visioning where you're going to be and how you're going to look with your medals on and that sort of thing. That's tough, though.
And I think you have to go in with the aspect of winning, but you have to appreciate when there is someone better out there.
Yeah. Well, but it's interesting, though, when you think about it. If I think I'm going to win, how do I look different on stage than the guy who's just happy to be there?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like someone was talking in a show one time, and recently I was listening, and they said, when we look at someone it was quite interesting. When we see two people competing and they're virtually the same, and we think of the twins, what's his name's twins, and they're the same. Yep. It'd be hard to pick between the two, right? And so then, do we look at confidence? Is confidence the thing that pushes them over the edge? Or as a judge, do I look at someone who's overly confident and say, that's annoying, and I'm happier with this person? Like, it was an interesting split, and they brought that up on the show.
I think confidence is a good thing, but when confidence becomes
narcissism,
crazy, ego, whatever, right? Like, that's when it becomes annoying. And I would agree that maybe they shouldn't win or whatever, right? Especially if you're splitting hairs on a physique, because it's presentation, right? You've got to present yourself well and be confident and such like that. But if it's over the top, it's almost to the point where it is annoying.
Yeah. I think, like, of the number of shows that I've done, I think now the best that I feel on stage is when I go on without expectation. Yeah. And I'm just there to do what I'm there to do, and I'm there to do my poses, stand where I'm supposed to stand, look like a pro. But like, I literally don't know what difference it would make if I'm in my head thinking, I'm going to beat that guy. Like, I'm really going to beat this guy. Like, how would I perform differently? Like, I need to perform the way I need to perform. And that's all you can focus on. You just got to perform the way what you've been doing up till this point, and do your best, right? You hope everything worked out.
It's interesting backstage as well, because some athletes, just backstage, they look kind of sort of idea, but they get under the lights and they start posing, and they have muscles that have just appeared from nowhere, separations that have just come out of nowhere, right? And you're just like, where did that come from, right? So it's a tough one to compare yourself even backstage. And I also look at athletes and backstage, I'm like, wow, these are guys look really good, and I'm like, I look kind of flat, kind of in comparison. But you get on stage, and it's like, okay, you play second or whatever, right? Like, it's like, okay, there's a disconnect there, right? So
it's that's an interesting thought, because I was the last time I was up, you're standing in line with these guys, you're interacting with them. And so, exact same experience. I was like, oh man, his legs are way better than mine. His back is better, whatever. And then you get on stage, you do your thing, and then you go and see the photos afterwards. And it's like, I'm like a foot taller than these guys. Like, it's weird. Like, you don't realize it when you're standing there. Or it's like, my arms are twice as big as that guy. Like, it's weird. You don't really see it when you're in person for some weird reason.
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and that's a good mindset as well. Like, you got to be objective and compare yourself after the fact, right? Like, let's look at the photos or the position from where the judges are under the lights, right? And you never do yourself, at least we always knock ourselves down.
Yeah.
Like, at least the majority of people will, right? So you're always going to look at yourself as lesser than the people around.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
and I think it's tough too, because you get into, like, we're trying to judge a physique. And I don't know if you heard what's that knucklehead out in Toronto? He's a podcast guy, Greg.
Dillette?
Yeah.
Dillette?
No, the podcast guy. The Greg Doucette.
Doucette, yeah, okay.
I don't know if you heard what he said.
No,
and
but
he's got canceled hard just over the last few weeks. So he came out and said that at the end of the day, I'm really watering down what he said, but he said, especially in bikini, it's just about how, he didn't say attractive, but he said basically how attractive in a very sexual way someone is on stage. Right. That's what causes the win versus the best body, which, and people jumped on it hard. Like, it was not good, but like, that would be a tough job as a judge too, you're looking at these bodies. And I think as an athlete, we're so familiar with this, you know, and this, and then we get beat by someone we've only met today, and suddenly I'm not happy with that, because I think, look, I feel like I'm better than them. I've been looking at myself for months. I must be better. That's a tough one too. Hey, like, you probably bump into that a lot, where an athlete comes and is like, I don't get it. Like, I should have been better, or I should have beat that guy, or whatever.
For sure, and even the coaches are often worse than the athletes themselves. But they're always coming from a super biased position, right? Yeah. So you, as a judge, you have to come back to the criteria that you're judging the athletes on, right? And there's no perfect physique on stage typically, right? So you just have to kind of come back to the criteria, which athlete, fits the criteria best, and you score them accordingly to that, right? So one of the things I like about the WNBF is there was a strict, like, there's no facial beauty involved in any of the categories, right? So right the way through from bikini all the way through to...
That's why I'm doing well.
There we go.
Thank goodness.
And the other thing that we do in bikini that is slightly different is we judge the full back. Like, we remove the hair comes off the back, so that you can score. It's not just a hamstring contest. It's let's look at the shoulders, the back. Like, let's look at everything as a whole, right?
So it includes rhomboids.
Includes rhomboids, the erector spinae, everything, right? So it's I do like that about the WNBF Federation. It's not just seen as a glute competition, so to speak, right? As well as the facial kind of gets removed as well, right? So,
which I don't think we're encouraging anyone to not put on makeup.
For sure. Judging facial beauty but versus presentation. Now, presentation does come into the fact of, okay, how is their hair and their makeup? What's the jewelry? What's their bikini suit look like and stuff like that? So that can absolutely factor in. But again, if like someone's, just again, scoring beauty as a category or a criteria is removed. So
I'm so glad I'm not in bikini, because that seems like so much extra work. Holy smokes! Like, to worry about your jewelry and seems like a lot of work.
Bodybuilders have it easy.
Pretty much.
Right? We just put on the Speedo and
the smallest possible piece of material, and away you go. I forget, it was someone who said they were joking about what is the biggest mistake you've ever made in competing. And the one guy said in his first show, he went on stage in flip-flops.
Oh my gosh.
No one called him out on it.
Right, just let it be. Like, okay. Okay. Some of the things we don't ever think we have to talk about at the athlete meeting, maybe there's some things we have to review. Yeah. The flip-flops must come off before getting on
So
stage.
What's your biggest, can you think back? Do you think you ever did anything that was kind of, I can't believe I did that?
I think I've got into that mindset as well, where you see athletes backstage and, you just continue to fuel up because you feel like you need to, kind of thing. I've definitely spilled over on stage. I think that's probably my worst sort of worst mistakes, so to speak. But for the most part, I think I'm pretty consistent. You're building a mindset leading up to the day itself, right? So I haven't ever forgotten my posing trunks or music or anything like that. So
that'd be so bad. Yeah. I can't imagine forgetting your posing trunks. I always bring two, just on the off chance that I forget mine. It's totally. Yeah, that's crazy. So, well, did we cover? Oh, what about supplements? We didn't even talk about supplements on like game day or just in that last week. What do you do with creatine? I
keep creatine in all the way through. Yeah, just because it's typically stored in the muscle. Now. Yeah, exactly. So don't usually cut anything that most athletes have been consuming up to the show day. I'm pretty much keeping it in most of the time. Sometimes I'm going to cut back on the if people do consume some artificial sweeteners, right, or diet pops.
What do you feel happens with that? Like
there just seems to be some sort of water retention in general, right? And that can skew the scale a little bit, but it also can create some like blurriness between the lines of the muscles itself. So generally, I like to just remove some of the artificial sweeteners or as much as possible that week. But supplement-wise, just, generally keeping most things up. Some athletes, they will insist on taking watertight, so I'll use it for them. But I typically just, for most of my athletes, I'm like, water is your biggest natural diuretic, right? So the more we drink, the more you're going to flush out. So,
You know what's interesting about, this would be an interesting thing to just have a peek at. Most of the watertight and all those products, they're dandelion root, right? Yep. So you can literally go buy dandelion root, which I would tend to believe is identical to watertight. There might be one other chemical or something. I think watertight has potassium, magnesium, like just minerals. Yeah. So you don't lose. But what we think watertight does is it removes water. It causes this extra amount of release of water. When you go to buy dandelion root from a herbal store, it says the exact opposite. It's for water retention.
Interesting.
Isn't that weird? Yeah. Like I was looking at that. I have a bottle of dandelion root and it just said it's to maintain water in your body.
Interesting.
The complete opposite of what we think it's doing. I don't know.
I'd be curious to look into that a little bit more as well because, typically if water's being retained in the areas we want it to, in the muscles, then that's a good thing, which is why I keep in creatine and things like that, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah. The other one that used to be, probably is still quite popular is, what is it? It's, some people take vitamin C, but there's another one that's one of the...
Like a B vitamin? Or?
No, it's like one of the ones that's in a lot of pre-workouts. It's the one that causes you to turn red. Like it's, what is that one?
Not beta-alanine. It's
it might be beta-alanine, but it's one of those anyways. And some people take a lot of it. Yeah. And then they get that flushing, it's called, when you turn all red. But it should possibly help you pump up a bit. Yeah. Yeah, that's kind of...
They probably... And actually, one of the things that we found just running shows in general, and... I typically have told my athletes not to take pre-workout before stepping on stage. Yeah. We do find that those that sweat on stage, if we ask them, did you take a pre-workout before going out? It's always a yes.
Really? Yeah. Then it would be interesting to see what's in that particular one they took. And if I had to bet, it's beta-alanine.
It's probably something like that.
Yeah, and then there's so much caffeine in it, which caffeine causes your blood vessels to constrict, which is not good. Right. So, I wouldn't take pre-workout. I would take maybe... I don't know what I'd take. I don't take anything.
I actually like, I do suggest sometimes people take coffee, but not right before going on stage, but in the morning of, because, again, it kind of brings up the body temperature. People are used to consuming coffee as well, so I kind of I use your routine. The one thing that I have done before is I've cut out coffee myself, and I had a headache before going on stage, right? Because I took it out 2 days before, and I'm like, starting to get caffeine withdrawals, right? So actually, the last prep, I've been a lot more moderate on my sort of I only take one coffee a day now, even in preps and stuff like that. Versus before, it was like, hey, I'm hungry, so I'm going to drink another coffee. I'm going to take my pre-workout as well, right? So I've been a lot more moderate.
You don't just put your pre-workout in your coffee?
I've probably done that at one point. So
that'd be so good. So. Well, cool. Well, listen, let's wrap it up, and then that way we'll leave something for next time.
I love it. Thank you very much.
And we'll get back out there. Awesome. So, all right. Well, thanks for your time. Thanks for coming. All right, you bet.